Hello everybody, and welcome to another vlog about my small collection of Leica cameras. This one is going to be, I suppose, a little bit different in as much that we won't be comparing one screw thread Leica with another one and looking at the quite sort of subtle differences that each new model had over the previous one, because we're going to be looking at something entirely different. On my last upload, I compared this 3F that you're looking at now with the earlier 3C, and the 3F was introduced new in 1951 as a replacement to the 3C, and during the, if you like, the reign of the 3F, a totally new range of cameras appeared from Leica, namely the M series. The first of them was the M3, and this was eventually followed by, illogically, the M2. Now, I don't have an M2 to show you because I don't have an M2. It's that simple. But what I do have is an M3. And what I'd like to do, this isn't really going to be, well, it will be a comparison, but we can't really compare subtle little differences in design that happen through natural development, because the M3 is a totally new and radical design. So I'm just going to put the 3F just there, and into the frame I'm going to put this M3. And I think you can see quite convincingly that the M3 is a much bigger camera. It must have been quite perhaps I don't know, a shock to the Leica enthusiasts when the M3 first appeared on the scene in 1954, I believe. I've been trying to find out exact dates when the little subtle changes started to appear on the M3, such things as the appearance of the single stroke wind-on and the appearance of the frame line pre-selector. But it's like everything else, you can always find these details when it doesn't matter, but once you want to actually find them to make notes so that you can explain things to other people, they suddenly sort of disappear off the net. So some of the things some of the data or details are going to be a bit on the well, I'm not going to mention exact dates. I think that's the best thing, because I'd rather not mention them at all, or mention dates and then only to find out that they're totally wrong. I just had a quick slurp of coffee there. So I'm going to move the 3F off stage. I think it's pretty convincing that the M series is somewhat larger, and just concentrate for a bit on this particular camera. This one came, I tell you how I came about it really, because I was looking around for 3G, which would have completed my 3 series collection, in as much that I got a 3A, a 3B, a 3C, a 3F, and the 3G was the logical conclusion. But while I was looking around at 3Gs, often fitted with Summicron lenses and such like, but not always, I realised that, well, for this sort of money I can actually get an M3. So I started looking at M3s instead, and I found this one. It was on eBay. It came not with this lens. This is actually a Summicron, or a Summicron. I prefer to call them Summicrons, but most people call them Summicrons. But it actually came with a 90mm Elmar f4, which is a nice portrait lens, and it came it came with the IIIF 2.8 lens. But then later on, the following year, I saved up my meagre allowance, and no, but not say that in case the wife's listening. No, I saved, put a bit of money aside, and decided to see what I could get for my budget limit on a Summicron, and I bought this one. The reason I bought it was I was quite happy with the Elmar, but they always look nice, don't they? These with the larger diameter front element of the f2 lenses, and so I bought the Summicron and fitted that on. But I've still got the Elmar. And anyway, before we discuss lenses, let's just have a look at the camera itself. The first thing that you'll notice is that, looking at it from the top here, that obviously it's as different as chalk and cheese from the 3F. For a kick-off, the film winder is now a lever. What you can't see, but I will explain, is that the rangefinder, the split image rangefinder, is now in the middle of the viewfinder, so you can focus and compose without having to look through two separate different windows, which is quite convenient, but it's no big deal, but it obviously does make operation quicker. So we've got a combined rangefinder and viewfinder. We also have the lever, which I'll come back to later. But the most interesting thing in some respects is that the M series, they still load effectively from the base of the camera. And what I will now demonstrate, if I can, I'll remove the base for a moment, and I will show that this rear plate completely lifts up, so that you still load the film in that way, but you can see how the film is aligning with these sprockets, and believe me, it does make things that little bit easier. This camera is an early one. This is a glass pressure plate, which was later changed to a metal one at some point. I believe it was 1957. Anyway, I'll close that back down, and I will put the base plate back on, like so. And turn the camera back the right way. Believe me, it does make loading the film that more convenient, because you can actually see the film align properly with the sprocket holes. Other differences are the lenses are a bayonet fit, so they're quicker to fit, well, slightly quicker. And the rewind lever here has now moved from the top, and this lever just rewinds the wind mechanism, so you can rewind. A lot of cameras have a button underneath, but you can't do that on a Leica, because the base plate removes. So it's either on the top, or it's now moved to this convenient place here. The M3 has a separate film counter, separate little window there. And what else does it have? The early ones had these bigger ear straps as well. There are little differences. I'm not fortunate enough to have a whole range of M series cameras that we can compare. This is the only M series I have, and it's probably, I don't know, I might look around for a later one, but it's only going to be really the same camera. But anyway, maybe, you know, one of the 1960 ones, I don't know, probably not. I'm just probably just probably dreaming now. Sorry about this, I'm still keeping my mouth lubricated. I've got some notes here as well. The M3 was introduced in 1954. This is an early one. This is a 1955 one. Production stopped in 1966, and 22,000 units had been made by that time. So that's, that's not bad, is it really? Not bad at all. But during that time, that they did, there were modifications. This one's a double stroke, so I'll turn it round the other way and I'll demonstrate that, because that's how you got the shutter. It's not one wind, it's two relatively short ones like so. And I believe the reason for that is the Leica engineers thought that one long rewind, which you can do reasonably quickly, could actually maybe snap the film. But the other theory is that two shorter strokes are quicker than one longer stroke. I don't know which is which. They may both be right, but the double stroke mechanism eventually was replaced by a single stroke, and I've been trying to find out when this happened, but it was, a few years after the introduction of the M3, and and there were one or two other modifications. I think the film speeds may have altered or something like that, or I don't quite know. I tried to find these things out, but it's like everything else, when you're trying to find something, you never manage to do it. What else is different about this? Well, it's got the two flash sockets here. That one's for electronic flash, that one's for bulb flash. There's also, again, a film reminder. This is literally a reminder. These cameras don't have any light meter, so you could put your film in and then set this just to show you what film speed you've got. It's currently set to a 200 ASA film, so yeah, that's right, because the ASA marking is the outer one. So if you've put some HP5 in from Ilford, which is what I use, you can't set it anyway because it only goes up to an ASA of 200, which is interesting because it does show the age of the camera. Anyway, this also doesn't have the pre-selector lever here. The only other lens I've got for this is the 90mm lens that it came with, and in the viewfinder window there is another bright line frame which indicates the view that you'll see with a standard 50mm lens on. If I replace this with a 90mm lens, that alters, and the bright line in the viewfinder is reduced in size, because the field of view with a 90mm lens on is going to be less, and if I put a 1.25 lens on, it would reduce even more. But I can only do that with the lens on. Later models had a little lever here where you could pre-select those frame lines without actually changing lenses, and it's no big deal. It just, I suppose, saves a little bit of time, but you'll instantly recognize those by another little lever just there. So that's another way of recognizing an early one. But yeah, I don't know exactly when the double stroke became a single stroke. I'm not quite certain when the viewfinder pre-select lever appeared. So I'm not going to guess, and I'm not going to quote years because they're bound to be wrong. But let's just say that those variations did appear later on in that period between 54 and 66. 12 years is a long time, I suppose, for a production run for a camera, and obviously little alterations are going to happen like that. I know these lugs altered in shape as well. So what do I think of the camera? Well, it's a very, very nice camera to own and to use. I mean, some people place all sorts of accolades on the M3. Things like it's the best rangefinder 35mm camera ever made. I'm not going to argue with that, but the problem I think with it is that, you know, being that little bit bigger, it's more chunkier, and if you've got one of the earlier ones, you know, these are pocketable, whereas the M3 is less so. But don't misunderstand me. The M3 is a lovely camera to have and to own and to use. And I've got nothing negative to say against it at all, other than, you know, it's that little bit bigger. But it is a lovely camera to own. And you know, if you do own one, then you'll know what I mean. And if you think about owning one, then if you can afford one and get a good one, do so. Don't hang around. They are quite lovely, and they are easier to operate, I think, more user-friendly than the screw thread Leicas. And it is a lovely looking camera. Oddly enough, the range developed. There was also the M2 which came along not long after. Now, I should explain that the M3 is really designed for 50, 90 and 135 lenses. The reason for that is because the bright line frames are actually built in and only become visible when you change lenses. You can use a 35mm lens on these, but if you do any research about that, you'll find that the 35mm lenses for these cameras come with what they call spectacles, which is a device that I haven't got one. I can't show, so I'm not quite certain how they work. But I think you attach the lens and then you attach the whole thing to the camera, or you might not. I don't know, because I've never actually seen any. I've seen photographs of them. But what they do, they adapt effectively what the viewfinder and rangefinder see to a 35mm camera. Or I suppose the other way you could do it is to not have the spectacles. I mean, they're called that because when they're attached, they make the camera look quite odd. It looks as though it's wearing glasses, and you know, it doesn't actually make them look particularly, in my opinion, particularly nice. They just look odd. The other way of doing it, of course, would be to place one of those variable viewfinders that you can get. Leica make them. Probably better off maybe getting an inexpensive Russian one, I don't know, and then looking at the view through that viewfinder. Not as convenient, but the 35mm lenses for these with the spectacle plates, they are not they're not cheap. As I've said, this lens wasn't. The camera came with a Elmar f2.8, but I quite fancied a Summicron, and getting hold of a Summicron isn't that difficult, but you have to be careful with the Summicrons because, well, like all these Leica lenses, they're not cheap to buy, but be very aware, because although you can't see it in this light, The actually the iris blades on this one are quite nice as well. But there are one or two little what are euphemistically called cleaning marks on the lens. You can't see them in this light at all, but in certain lights you can. But light's glass, I read somewhere, is actually quite soft anyway, so it's very prone to getting scratched. And there are a few little scratches. I mean, I'm not going to call them cleaning marks because that's what the vendors, the sellers, tend to euphemistically call them. In fact, I suppose if I was selling that lens, I'd do the same thing because everybody calls them cleaning marks, but they're scratches, they're fine scratches. But I've had that lens, or I've had this lens on. I've taken photographs with the camera. I've run film through this camera. I've also had this particular lens on a digital camera, and the images are very, very nice. So I'm very happy with it. The other thing about this particular camera, I've covered the pre-selector lever, or lack of it, and the fact it's a double stroke, haven't I? The other thing about this particular camera is I know it hasn't ever been serviced. I suppose one half of me wants to say yes, it should go off for servicing, but the trouble is that you do that, then you don't see them for 6 months. And I don't use this camera a lot. I've got rather a lot of cameras, and I like to try to use them in turn. I put at least one film through it, and the exposures and the exposure across the plane, the negative plane, was very nice. So the shutter is working properly. It's not there's no or doesn't appear to be any problem with the blinds. There's no lag, and you know it sounds quite nice. But I suppose, you know, it wouldn't hurt to have it serviced. But the other thing I wanted to show you is if I just remove the lens for a moment. I don't know whether you can see this, but where's my I haven't got my fine pointer, so I'll just use a conveniently placed biro. If you look there, and I apologise to people who know about this, but I'm just assuming not everybody does. But if you look there, I don't know whether you can see that, but there's this particular hole here is quite deep. I don't know if there's a screw right at the bottom of it or what, but it's quite deep, and that's full of wax, and that's full of black wax. And if I don't know, I can get any closer, move the camera about a bit, but there's actually a raised L on that in the wax, so it's got a sort of a seal on it. That's the factory seal. I believe if it's a raised L, which that one is, that is the factory seal. So that's when it left the factory brand new, that it was sealed with a raised L. So once the camera is serviced, that wax has to be removed to get this, actually strip the camera down. So if that shows that it hasn't received any attention that has required a strip down. So the question is, should I have it serviced? It's working fine, or what? I don't know. There are collectors who prefer them, I believe, with that seal intact. Presumably these are people who just stick them in cabinets and admire them. I like my Leicas to be usable, and it is usable. You could argue that if there's anything really fundamentally wrong, it will tell you, usually with problems with shutter drag or speeds that aren't right, and this one appears to be working perfectly well. So do you have it serviced, lose that wax seal or not? I don't know. I'll have to give it some thought. The problem is though that you send your camera off for a service and it disappears for 6 months, although I suppose on the other hand it doesn't get a lot of use. I've got about 15 cameras of various types, and I do intend to include doing a vlog about those, but I thought I'd do the Leicas first anyway. So I think that's probably about it. I'll bring the 3F back into the frame as well. Next time I do one, I'm going to introduce you to the 3G, and that will be the last of my Leica uploads. So what I think we'll do is we'll compare the 3G with the M, because there are sort of features on the 3G which the designers have well, they've not actually taken them and put them on the 3G, but there's little details about the 3G which I think were inspired by the M series, and we have to remember that the M series didn't replace the screw thread Leicas. Let's see, I think the M3s were this is a 55 one. I think they were introduced in 54. So the last of the 3Gs were made in 1960. So there was a good 6 years when Leica were making both the M series and the screw thread series. So it was not a replacement. It was an alternative model, which of course the M series did eventually take over completely. But anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for watching. If you've got any comments that you'd like to make, please don't hesitate. And anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you soon with the 3G, hopefully. Till then, ta-ta for now.